tuned in to RBLR, the home of Tampa Bay's Reveler Sports.
Hello, all you Rowdies fans in Tampa Bay and beyond. This is James Knowles coming to you for the RBLR Sports podcast. I am here with Carlos to discuss the RBLR Rowdies show. Of course, Carlos, how are you doing? That's where we always start these.
James, you know what? It hasn't been a terrible weekend. Everything's been going pretty well and whatever. And then I sat down and I watched the Rowdies game, and it kind of messed up my mood for the rest of the weekend, sadly. We'll talk about this game in a little bit, and we'll get into all of this. So I'm just going to put the Rowdies, discussion about this game against Louisville to the side for a second and say that, my weekend's been pretty good. I'm wrapping up my time here at home in Tampa before I start my semester again in college up in DC. So, enjoying my last local bit of Tampa Bay before I go back up. But you know what? I mean, enjoying it here, relaxing at home a little bit. And yeah, I'm honestly just looking forward to getting back up and getting back on the grind. And apart from that, James, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. This past weekend, I got to do a little bit of dancing because I am in a friend's wedding this upcoming weekend, and it is a traditional Indian wedding. So I have to learn like a whole dance, and it's been interesting to say the least. But I think I'm just about there. I think I've got it. And also for anybody wondering, yes, the kitten is still here. You might hear him at some point. I have a foster. It's the same one from last week. So again, just want to get that out of the way. If you hear some squeaking, there's no rat running around. It is just a tiny little kitten. But we'll move on now because we've got to get into this, Carlos. We got to talk about a less savory game, let's say, than we're used to, especially from these past 2 months now. On Saturday night, the Rowdies lost for the first time in 14 matches, and I'm sorry, it's the first loss since April in a disappointing 1-0 dropped game away to Louisville City up in Kentucky. So yeah, that is obviously not where we want to be, but that's what happened this past weekend. So Carlos, you and I get 0 points for our predictions in our personal standings. Womp womp to us.
Yeah, sucks, James. Like we said, tough loss, and we'll get into all the breakdown here in a little bit. I'm personally more excited about previewing our upcoming game this weekend against another fun opponent in Colorado Springs, over in Colorado Springs away. So it'll definitely be a great game. Definitely look forward to that preview. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's the first time we'll be out there. So, always a fun time to play somewhere for the first time. And it's a nice stadium over there, very scenic, mountains in the background. Love that kind of stuff. Definitely different from, the water and Bay Area background. Al Lang. So always love a new and scenic venue. So stay tuned for that preview. And apart from that, James, we can get into our review of this game in a second. But before we do that, I just want to ask all you guys to quickly follow RBLR Sports on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at RBLR Sports. And definitely drop a like and subscribe to this podcast on all major podcast platforms. Wherever you get your podcast, you'll find RBLR Sports. And with that, James, let's hop into this quick review. Maybe a little quicker than usual because I'm sad about this game. So I want to move on to the preview of the next game already. But James, let's hop into this, and maybe you hit us off with our lineup as per usual.
Yeah, absolutely. So that starting lineup was CJ Cochran in net, as per usual. Aaron Gein, Connor Antley, and Jordan Scarlett at the back. In the midfield was Sebastian Dalgard on the left, Nicky Law, Lewis Hilton, and Dayon Harris starting as the right wing back. Jake LaCava was up top with Steven Dos Santos and Leo Fernandez. Now, I would say the way that this game went, we gave up an unfortunately soft goal. Let's leave it there for the time being. We're going to get into that a little bit more, but yes, unfortunately soft after a Connor Antley error. That was for Wilson Harris, who scored it in the second half, and that was all that Louisville City unfortunately needed. I would say the Rowdies did not cover themselves in glory in what was a very important game for us. Even according to Neil Collins, he said that the team probably did not live up to their own expectations of themselves. He said that there were very few positives, but one positive that he did note was at least Robert Castellanos did return to the field. So, that's something to highlight. I would say the only other thing to highlight at this point is, one thing that the Rowdies can do is draw a crowd. Louisville City had their record-breaking attendance of over 14,000 people show up to, unfortunately, see Louisville City beat us. But I do think that this has to do with, how big of a team the Rowdies are. We are truly a massive club, as everybody likes to say, because, Louisville City can't draw that many fans per usual. And I think that us being able to do that on, for them, let's say, a very nice tip of our hat to that team, as much as they did not pay back the favor. So let's move out of that and let's talk about what we saw here, because I didn't quite like it, but we'll do our questions and analysis segment anyway. Carlos, with this going now, what led to the Rowdies not living up to those expectations that we just mentioned? Was it, as Neil Collins, possibly just a series of off nights for you? What did you see?
I think you mentioned it well, I think here, uh, kind of characterizing it as expectations, because I think especially with kind of our recent run of form against Louisville, um, people expected us to go in there, and obviously it was going to be a good game. It was going to be a tight game, but I think there was some expectation on the part of the Rowdies community to go in there and um, put up a much more equal performance than what we saw on Saturday. And I thought we would go in there and come out with a win. Obviously, I'm biased and I'm going to predict a win most weeks. But in this situation, I honestly thought we'd go in there and pull off a tight win, just because of the history we've built in the past couple seasons against Louisville. Like I said, and we went in there to their stadium a couple seasons ago, and won 2-1 when they seemed to be a much better team than us at that time. Um, and I think at this point in the season, I saw us as a better team than them. I think we matched up better. I think we have better players overall. Um, but it did just seem kind of like an off night. I mean, maybe there's definitely some tactical stuff that just seemed off and out of place. But I mean, if you take a look at our star players, for example, off the top of my head, Leo Fernandez, right? I mean, this is a guy that is our star of the team right now. I mean, he's creating most chances. He's getting on the score sheet every other game. He's just that guy. But in this game, he was basically invisible. I mean, literally invisible
Yeah, he was.
up until stoppage time, when he had that
Right.
one shot that was really tough angle shot and made something out of nothing there. So I mean, kudos to him for that. But other than that, I mean, our stars were out of the game. And on the other side, on our other winger, Jake LaCava, our other star, I mean, he was kind of the only offensive production we had, like real offensive
That's my note
production.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he was running up the wing on multiple occasions, at least 3 or 4, and dribbling through 2, 3 Louisville defenders, and getting really close. I mean, to his credit, he was creating dangerous opportunities, and then like a normal human, he started to he couldn't get past that last guy. I mean, you can't take on 4 or 5 guys by yourself, but I mean, to his credit, he almost did it, and he was taking shots that were just getting blocked at the last second. So,
Right.
he had a couple chances that looked really dangerous. But again, I mean, you can't really fault him for not putting those away, when he's the only real engine of offensive production on the night, and he's taking on 3, 4 guys by himself. The only time I can kind of fault him for making the wrong choice at the end was on one of those really impressive runs. He was getting through 2 or 3 people, and as he was like kind of stumbling into the finish line and trying to get that shot off, he had Steven Dos Santos square to his right. I think pretty open, and if he was able to square that ball to him, it should have been a pretty open goal. But again, in that moment, I mean, he's taking on a bunch of people. It's very difficult for him to look up and make that decision, in a split second. So I can't fault him too much for that. But um, I think it was really more of it than anything, just kind of an off night. Um, I don't know what it was. Like, we should have been able to go in there and put up a more equal performance, but kind of in a similar way to how we played against Detroit last weekend, Louisville played against us. I think Louisville fans probably expected us to be more on the front foot than we were, kind of like how last week I was expecting Detroit to be more on the front foot. than they were. And even more so in this case, because we're so much more of an equal to Louisville, if not a better team, like I'm saying. So I don't know what I think we just came out very flat-footed, not looking too confident, and that slow start gave Louisville really, control of the whole game. And we could have left with a draw, but like you said, it was the Connor Antley mistake, just a quick lapse in judgment, which I've said in the past, we can't make those mistakes against good teams like Louisville. And it happened on this particular game, and that's what gave them the win. So, I mean, it's unfortunate. It feels like that first place spot is kind of slipping out of our grasp. Maybe the second place spot even. I mean, I'm not going to say that's out of our grasp yet. Obviously, we're tied with Memphis, but we'll talk about the standings briefly in a little bit. But they do have a game in hand, and it's going to be much more complicated than I think we would like. So it is. It's a very important game, and to see it play out that way is unfortunate because of those expectations we had going into Louisville. But it's interesting because of that one silly mistake. The narrative and kind of tone of this podcast is much different than if we would have left with a 0-0 draw, even though the rest of the performance would have been the same. So again, I'm not going to harp too much on negatives because we did come off this incredible streak here of being unbeaten. So the loss is going to come eventually. It just sucks that it comes in this particular way against this particular team.
I think that that's a really good summary. It's very difficult for a team to go unbeaten. The only time that I can remember a team going unbeaten in a whole season is Arsenal from like 2004. That
Right.
is literally nearly 20 years ago now in all of the leagues that I would know of, which is way too many. It's way
Right.
too many. There is only that example that I can think of. The idea of us going unbeaten is, it's frankly ridiculous.
Right.
But to have lost this game in this manner, as you said, that's the real kicker. That is the real bummer for this game. I think that I'll go through just a little bit of our tactics when we move a little bit farther into the questions here. I don't want to jump the gun there, but I do want to just say, like, the Rowdies have proven themselves to be a better team than we saw on Saturday night. And you can have off nights as a team, though, to like collectively have an off night. That's kind of what I see so weird about this game. And I'm assuming that this is going to be an outlier. It's going to be difficult, obviously, with the Rowdies going on the road again this upcoming week into a very good team again. So, we'll see how that goes. But like I said, this is, as far as I'm aware, this has got to be an outlier for one thing. Because the team, we need them as fans to do better. But I was definitely very taken aback at times from the way that it was going. So let's move into the next question. We'll keep working our way down here. But so you talked about it a little bit. Leo Fernandez, he was virtually taken out of the game with Louisville City's defense. And that is uncharacteristic for the season that he's been having. So what did you see related to Leo Fernandez and how he was taken out of the game? And then on the opposite side of that coin, why was Jake LaCava the only real engine of our offensive production? He was the only one that I saw having much success at all.
Yeah, here's where we get into more of the tactical talk, I think, because I think the biggest thing was really that Louisville was able to this kind of bleeds into a question I jotted down as well, but Louisville was very easily able to impose their style of play on the game. It took us a lot more effort to play our game, to play our style. And at the end of the day, we really weren't able to play that style that we like to play on the wings and whatnot, because last week we talked about this matchup against Louisville as being a good chance to really embrace our playing down the wing philosophy, really embrace, Dalgard, Dion Harris, whoever's playing on the wingback position, Leo Fernandez, Jake LaCava, to be in a good space, in a good position to whip a good ball in for a Steven Dos Santos in the middle of the box. because of his frame, because he kind of stands over the Louisville defenders. And that was something I
Towers
was,
over.
yeah. I mean, this is a game that I thought we could really exploit that. I've said before that I think, we match up better on the wings, especially, and that was a possible strength. Somebody like Brian Ownby, who played a great game against us, I think we have that he's like one of their stars, right? And I think our stars just matched up better, and he plays more on the wing, but he played like, frankly better than most of our guys just because we were off our game and we weren't able to play down the wing like we usually do. And I
Yeah.
think that's just because Louisville was able to press higher, and kind of dominate the ball possession more than we're comfortable with. Usually we're kind of on the other end of that where we have more of the ball. And I think this is the first time this season where we didn't really know and we weren't too comfortable with having less possession, being in a space where we can't create as many chances as we have. Um, we have to be more clinical with the few chances we do have in games like this. Yeah, I mean, even the only other game that I can think of this season that was a game where the other team might have had like a little bit more possession than us, like pretty clearly, it was maybe the Orlando game in the Open Cup. And even then, we did more than we did against Louisville.
Oh yeah, big time.
Yeah, and so it just seems like we're a little bit uncomfortable with not having as much possession, and we kind of seemed lost in the spotlight in this game. And then I guess that was the situation and why we weren't able to get the ball down the wings. Lewis Hill, I've mentioned this before, our two center midfielders in this particular game were Lewis Hilton and Nicky Law, who got subbed out pretty late in the game. And I've said before that the success of our wingers has to do with these guys in the middle. And they just weren't really able to do anything because they were so deep in our own half defending. They weren't in a position to push the ball up, work the ball with short passes before finding a lane, with a long ball over the top because, I mean, everybody was just so deep defending in our own half. I think that was the biggest thing. We just couldn't really effectively counterattack. And when we did get some possession of the ball, Louisville was able to drop back quickly and take it back quickly. And our only counterattack mechanism in this particular game was Jake LaCava because, a Lewis Hilton or a Nicky Law just has to get the ball up as quick as possible so we don't turn it over. And Jake LaCava is essentially by himself with maybe a trailing Steven Dos Santos to take on the whole team. I think tactically that was our biggest, challenge. Just not having the ball enough and not really knowing how to counterattack well against this Louisville team. And in short, just not being able to play our game and play our style down the wing.
Yeah, the way that I would describe our our defensive effort was, we as you said, we didn't have the ball very frequently, but the Rowdies have proven themselves able in other games to handle that dynamic and still deal with it. Orlando City is a perfect example. It's not that Orlando City was actually even all that ball dominant in that game, but when we were out of possession, we were doing a very good job to get ourselves into possession at some point by applying pressure in good areas, applying pressure at the right times and to the right people, all that kind of stuff. In this game, I noticed it very quickly. Louisville City had the ball, let's say, with one of their center backs. Sean Toach has the ball, and he is, let's say, roughly around the center circle. He could be in their half, in our half, whatever it is, but in the center circle. Steven Dos Santos is in our half, 20 or 30 yards away from Sean Toach, where he can't even, get on him to apply any pressure. And, that's got to at least be down to a coaching decision. And I'm not entirely sure what the decision there would be. Maybe they think that Louisville City is just a very press resistant team and, they can handle the pressure of our defensive efforts in that and play around it. and then still make a chance out of, whatever they've created for themselves. So I don't know if that's something that Neil Collins thought ahead of time we needed to not do for that reason. But yeah, I was very taken aback by that specifically. And the lack of pressure that we put on them meant that they could all take their time with the ball. And it was several times that a player in their attacking unit, whether that was Brian Ownby most of the time, or Enoch Mushagalusa, or the guy on the kind of the right inside wing, Ray Serrano. Whether one of those three players, they had all the time in the world. They were getting the ball in space over and over, and they had so much room, and that is just so unlike the Rowdies.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it was frustrating. I mean, I think we're expressing that sentiment pretty clearly, but yeah, I don't really know what the solution is. Obviously, I'm not Neil Collins, and I'm not, a soccer technical mastermind either. But it does feel like when a team is able to eliminate our threat on the wing, that we're just kind of lost. It felt a little bit like we didn't really know how else to play. There wasn't really any other, method to turn to. And usually that's fine because it's worked out, clearly for so many games. So, I mean, why fix what's not broken? Or wait, yeah, that's the saying. I forgot how the saying goes, but you get what I'm saying. Like, it's usually worked, but obviously against Louisville, it hasn't. So, I mean, James, I'll pose this question to you. Obviously, Louisville is one of the best teams in the league. We're up there as one of the best teams in the league in the Western Conference. I mean, there's a couple other really good teams, like who's in first? San Antonio is clear in the first place over there. So I'm just putting this out there. Say it's like a Rowdies San Antonio final. We make it all the way to the final. We're out in San Antonio. First time we play them in a really long time. Is this, potential problem, I guess, of relying too much on our wing approach, on our attack on the wing? Is over relying on that a problem against really good teams like Louisville, like San Antonio, like any other really good team we might play in the future who might be able to shut that down, like Louisville did this past weekend?
I would definitely, personally, yes, I would definitely say that it is a problem because it's not that the Rowdies are out of options when you shut that down, but it obviously, as we've noted, does severely limit those options. And it's not that the Rowdies can't handle when they are under pressure themselves. Although I'll tell you what, we did not do a great job in this past game against Louisville City. Their pressing was very good and successful, and that's of course how they scored their goal. But yeah, how do we play around that when it happens, and how do we give ourselves the chance to win despite that? Now, the Rowdies do create a lot of chances from their own pressing. So again, my question, unfortunately, the Rowdies haven't been doing as many of the post-game press conferences, so I didn't have a chance to ask, Neil Collins what he thought of our sitting back and our not applying that pressure that the Rowdies and Rowdies fans are so used to seeing. I'm going to ask him when we do the pregame press conference this upcoming Thursday, provided that is at the same time that it usually is. But yeah, I would like us to at least try to apply some pressure again in the future instead of sitting 20, 30 yards back and waiting for them to play it into Brian Ownby, who's already made a run into the little bit of space that he's got in between the lines. And then he's pretty successful with it, all that kind of stuff. I would like to see us definitely apply that pressure, of course. And then, if that is something where, if it's a situation where the Rowdies are unable to play through pressure, or are playing against a team that is very press resistant, so, they can play through our pressure, then, what would be a plan B for our attack? They've shut down our wings like this. I guess most frequently in situations like that, obviously you either need to go up the middle, which is not that the Rowdies can't do, but there's not a lot of playmaking that goes on in the middle. Frequently our playmaking is Lewis Hilton passing the ball out to the wings, as opposed to, trying to eat up space on his own. Sometimes Jan Ekra does that, and I will give Jan Ekra his due credit there that he is able to beat a couple guys on the dribble usually, and then he lays it off. He will do a give and go every now and again. I obviously love Jan Ekra as a player, but that's something that maybe he could be involved in. When you don't have the options to play it out on the wing like we would normally play it out, then we need to focus on the midfield or the middle of the midfield, and we need to try and get somebody who can carry it up there. So maybe put Leo Fernandez instead of, this inside wing role that he's been playing, put him in a number 10 and see if he can just dribble some guys. I mean, hell, he can, but we got to give him a chance to do it, I guess. Jake LaCava is definitely best as that inside winger where he can, try and beat a player, not just on the dribble, but also for speed. So, maybe not have him in a number 10, but give him a chance to succeed where, I don't know, maybe try and suck a team in and then beat them over the top and send them on a long ball, let him chase it down, I'm not entirely sure what all of the options are. Again, Jan Ekra would be a good one in terms of his press resistancy, that he can dribble a couple guys and maybe eat up some space that way. But yeah, I would like to definitely see more options in the future than the Rowdies were able to conjure in this game against Louisville City, because without our usual go-to really working for us, then we did look out of options. And it could probably just be a whole team off night if this is what we saw. But it was very, like I said already, it was very weird because we're just not used to this, and I certainly didn't like it.
Yeah, and just to focus on a little bit of good from this game. Obviously, you talked about the attendance, which is I think a good thing for the league and for the Rowdies, and people like seeing big teams play against each other, and I think this was a good situation for that, and obviously set a good environment for a big crowd. But things that are more specifically good for the Rowdies, I want to talk a little bit about the back line in this particular game, because Louisville is a very offensively powerful team. They have a lot of weapons, and we've talked about this before. It's a very good team. And obviously you mentioned it earlier that they scored on a very, very, very silly goal. I mean, I just can't emphasize how just dumb that goal was, and the fact that was the reason we lost was so frustrating. But on this particular night, I mean, I think it's deserved to mention that the back line, I think, played pretty well. And I think might have been a bright spot in this game against Louisville, because despite, overwhelming possession from Louisville and the creating of some, pretty dangerous chances, I think the back line, in conjunction with, Nicky Law and Lewis Hilton having to drop back a little bit into that defensive mid role, I think they were able to shut down Louisville's offense pretty well. I can only really think of one, maybe two chances that were really clear chances at goal for Louisville. So again, I think our defense played pretty well, and I think it's worth mentioning that. But it might have to do with the fact that we have to drop back some of our offensive firepower to do so. But again, I just do think it's worth mentioning that because of the fact that this is such a rare game for us, where the other team has so much possession and whatnot, that, in my moral standings, I'm going to count this as a shutout for them, because it was such a boneheaded goal. So I'll count it as a shutout in my head. And I do want to mention here something, James, and ask you a question. I want to hear your thoughts on our backline's performance, but more specifically, I was pretty excited to see Robert Castellanos back on the field. I thought he played pretty well. Did you see anything from his performance and the backline's performance that, gave you a little bit of excitement in the midst of the frustration?
That's a good way to put it again here. So yeah, obviously, Connor Antley had his moment where he was not press resistant. He got bullied into giving up the ball in a bad spot, and they scored. That's something that we have come to never expect from Connor Antley. He is very good at keeping the ball for the most part. And then also he's pretty good at winning it back if he happens to give it away. So that sucked. But to get to the good spots, I think that Robert Castellanos coming on in the end was probably the brightest spot. Something that Neil Collins said, and we already mentioned. But I really liked what he did when he was out there. He looked feisty. I think that Louisville City and Tampa Bay Rowdies are two teams that are they know who each other is, so to speak. They are the big dogs of the Eastern Conference, and Memphis can do whatever they want right now. That means nothing for the last couple of seasons where Memphis has been a no-name team. It's Louisville City and it's the Rowdies, and they are the top teams, and those are the measuring sticks. So Louisville City getting this win, they're going to measure themselves against what the Rowdies have done, and they're going to say, wow, we were able to do that. That means we're a pretty good team. And we've talked about why that might be a little let's say a little hyperbolic because of the way that the Rowdies played, but still,
right.
If you are in this game and you look at it as a good rivalry, then you're frankly, another reason that I didn't understand the way the Rowdies played is that you should be like up for it. That's when your energy level should be the highest. There are all sorts of times when I think teams will get dinged for playing down to their opponent if they're playing somebody who's like down at the bottom half of the table or whatever. But to not show up in a game against Louisville City is just so weird for me. But Robert Castellanos, though, he did not. He came on. He was feisty. There was one time where he got a good little tackle in on Wilson Harris, somebody up top. I believe it was Wilson Harris. He's on the ground, and Robert Castellanos is already up, and he doesn't get the call. So Robert Castellanos looks down at him, and you can see him, you don't know what he's saying, but you can see that he's yelling at the guy, and he's doing the gesture, the get up gesture. And there was probably a couple of words in between get and up, which I'm sure, somebody might be able to guess, but right. it was really good to see that. And I think that also just being able to put him back there and allow other players to play other roles would be good too. Connor Antley is not a bad center back by any means, but maybe he, does something like that with that slip that led to the goal.
Sure.
Every so often. So maybe you put Robert Castellanos back there and you give Connor Antley a bit more room to try and dribble people like he would do as a right wing back, so it's really good in that sense. And I'm excited to see where he goes with it. I'm excited to see where Robert Castellanos goes with this, because I think that he is obviously a very good player. He earned a move from the USL Championship up to MLS because he was doing so well at this level. That means he's going to be a good player, of course, for us. And I'm good with that. I'm excited for that.
Yeah. And something I noticed in particular with regards to Robert Castellanos was he looked very agile and very mobile for his size, for his stature, and for somebody who's obviously coming off a pretty serious injury. I think that's the thing that kind of impressed me the most, was seeing how well he moved out there. It was something that was a concern for, I mean, this is obviously a player with a lot of talent, but is he back to form? Is he back in physical condition that he needs to be in to compete at a professional level? And I think we answered that question pretty quickly with the few minutes he had against Louisville. So excited to see him get some more minutes. That lingering question was likely the reason he didn't start against Louisville in such an important game. But who knows? I mean, maybe that would have been the right choice. So who knows? I mean, again, he's just coming off that big injury. He's just coming back. And I think he's only going to get better. But again, I'm just so impressed with how he moved, how he played. And like you said, his kind of aggression out on the field is going to serve us well for the rest of the season. And, going into our game next weekend, which we'll preview here in a little bit. With that being said, James, do you want to give me your man of the match here? And then we can kind of discuss this a little bit before we hop into our review of the standings.
Yeah. I mean, based on everything we've said, I would be tempted to give it to Robert Castellanos. I think that it's on it, and all, like, we are a biased Rowdies podcast. Naturally, I think everybody is well aware of that. But the man of the match overall was obviously Brian Ownby. If I'm going with a Rowdies player, though, then there's really only one option for me. It's the only guy who stood out as doing anything positive, and it is Jake LaCava.
Yeah, 100%. I'm taking Jake LaCava as well, obviously, as a Rowdies podcast. Last week I gave my overall man of the match to the Detroit goalie. And in this situation, this game, I will also give my overall man of the match to Brian Ownby, because he played a great game. He was so frustrating to watch. I always think he's like, I don't know, I feel like every season I see him and I'm like, this guy has like been playing forever. I feel
Yeah,
like he's,
right.
yeah,
Seriously.
it just feels like he's going to retire every season because I just feel like he's been here for so long, and he always comes back and runs around like faster than everybody else in the league, despite being like 33 years old. So whatever. Yeah, Brian Obi played a great game, but on our side of things, Jake LaCava, like I said, was really the engine for any offensive production. And I mentioned that on Twitter in the Discord a few times. He was very close, and honestly, he came inches away from putting us up 1-0. Who knows how that would have changed the game. So yeah, I'll say Jake LaCava is my man of the match. And and before we move on from chatting about this game, I do want to mention the fact that it's important to keep in mind that we also beat Louisville a few weeks ago, 1-0, on a pretty silly goal. It was a penalty. It was a well taken penalty. But I feel like there's a lot of narrative in some of the USL discussion circles about how big this win was. And again, it was a big win. But in the grand scheme of things in this Rowdies Louisville matchup, it's important to remember the fact that we're basically drawn up 1 win to 1 win. They're both 1-0 wins.
Yep.
So I would say that both those games aren't characteristic of one team being necessarily miles better than the other. Rather than this being a very tight series that honestly, I think we're just going to see this again in the playoffs as the deciding matchup in the Eastern Conference as per usual. So yeah, a matchup we'll have to keep an eye on, and a matchup we're definitely going to have to play again if I was a betting man. All right. So yeah, with that being said, I think we can wrap up our discussion of this review of a tough game, very frustrating, but things to look forward to, which we will discuss here in just a minute. Before we do that, before we talk about our standings, James, which I'll pass it over to you, let me just shamelessly plug the RBLR shop. That's shop.rblrsports.com. And checking out all the really cool designs we've cooked up. And I say we, but I mean Eureka. Eureka, the producer, has cooked up. With the we's doing a lot of work. I have not done any of the design. So shout out Eureka for that work. The link is in the description of this podcast. Please use the promo code COYR for 10% off a shirt. I've gotten a couple of friends to get some shirts, and they look really, really good in person. So definitely recommend you checking that out. And again, remember to use that code COYR for 10% off and get yourself a cool little deal. James, with that being said, let's hop into the standings here and talk about, I guess, how frustrated I am that we're not in first place after that result.
Yeah, obviously that result did not just mean that we lost to Louisville City. It also meant that we lost out on 3 points and they gained 3 points. So that impacts things a lot at the top of the Eastern Conference. Louisville obviously retains their place at that top of the Eastern Conference. With the win, we've been lamenting this whole time. They have 52 points now from 23 games played. That is one less than we have played too. So another impact there. It was one of those 6-pointer games, and boy, did they ever take advantage. But with that loss, Memphis has actually leapfrogged us into second place, and they have 48 points from their 23 games played. We also 48 points. 24 is what we have done, though, so they have that in hand, and it is important to consider their extra game with the rest of the season coming up, obviously. Birmingham and Pittsburgh have each played 24 games and have 44 and 43 points, respectively. Behind them are the Miami and Detroit City to round out the Eastern Conference playoff spots. So let's go over to the West now and see how things look. San Antonio still leads. They are out in actually the leaders of the Western Conference and the league overall. They have 56 points from 24 games played. San Diego have 49 points and have played 25 games so far. Our upcoming opponents, Colorado Springs, have 42 points from 24 games played. And behind them in their final playoff spots are New Mexico United, Sacramento Republic, El Paso Locomotive, and Las Vegas Lights. So Now, if you could, Carlos, let's talk about this game against Colorado Springs. Let's get away from everything that we've been discussing up until now because I don't want to keep focusing on it. It's probably best we just leave it in the past and we move forward until we hit this upcoming Saturday and another tough opponent.
Yeah, another tough opponent indeed in Colorado Springs, Colorado. We will be playing them this weekend away in Colorado in a very, very fun, very exciting matchup. Like I said, away in a new venue, in a new location for us. Always a fun time and very much looking forward to it. Colorado is a very, very good team. A lot of talent, a lot of goal scoring ability. Like you said, they're in third place. But this may be the best time to play them as they are on a bit of a skid here. In the last 5 games, they have lost twice and drew their other 3 games. In several of those games, they scored 3+ goals, but they've also conceded 3+ goals. So we should consider them both very dangerous up top and, in my little bit of scouting and the highlights I've seen, very leaky with their back line. So obviously we should do everything we can to take advantage of their troubles defensively in the back. In their last match, they scored 3 quick goals against El Paso. It was actually kind of a meme on Twitter for like the first half because within the first half hour, Colorado's up 3-0, and El Paso was just not looking good at all, despite it being a very heavily advertised matchup. And multiple of those goals came off the speedy high press of Colorado Springs. With that being said, they then proceeded to concede 4 goals in a row before equalizing again in stoppage time in a thrilling game, which finished 4-4. So definitely Colorado Springs does have the entertainment value going for them. As you can tell, they have very high scoring games. So with regards to some of their tactics, they do frequently play in a 4-2-3-1 formation with Cam Lindley pulling the strings in the middle. They have some good talent on the wings to watch out for, but the highlight man, the danger man, the guy that scores all the goals is Haji Berry, who beat Seba Gonzati last year in the Golden Boot race. It's definitely somebody to watch out for. It's definitely their go-to guy. He scores, all the goals. He scored the first 2 goals for them very, very quickly against El Paso this past weekend. So minimizing his impact will be heavily, heavily crucial. The good thing about that, though, James, is I think, we can focus our defensive approach almost exclusively planning around limiting Haji Berry's threat here. I feel like there's just not anybody else we should focus on shutting down. So do you want to talk a little bit about, his talent and what we should do to try and shut him down?
Yeah, so like you said, Haji Berry is going to be the most important guy here. I think that important factors in this will obviously be trying to limit some other players as well, including Cam Lindley, because he is going to be responsible for a lot of the playmaking. But let's focus on Haji Berry and what he can contribute because he's the guy. As much playmaking as Cam Lindley or anybody else is going to do, they're going to be looking for Haji Berry. So one thing that we can tell you about Haji Berry for sure, above all else, is that, he's obviously a very physically gifted player. When he was drafted into MLS, he was originally taken by Orlando City, provided what I've been reading today. And in the lead up, I should say, provided all of that is correct, of course. And Haji Berry has a lot of good guys, a lot of good coaches speaking for him in the past about what he can do on the run. So, it might be the case that he gets the ball to his feet and he pushes it past it and he tries to beat you that way. It might be the case that they just play it over the top for him to run onto and beat you that way. But Haji Berry is definitely a guy who will try to beat you for speed, among other things. He does have good feet, as any player at this level is going to have pretty good feet. There aren't too many guys who have a club foot out there or something, but I can definitely say that Haji Berry will, be able to put that to good use again when he tries to beat you that way. So maybe with that in mind, sitting somebody a little bit deeper is going to be more effective. I think that it will obviously be imperative for the Rowdies to try and cover for speed. So, who are our fastest guys out there? I might venture to bet that Connor Antley is one of our faster defenders. I don't know with Robert Castellanos. I really haven't seen enough of him to say whether or not he's a particularly quick guy, but I think that we need to keep an eye out on this. Something that we do need is very good anticipation for the kind of movement that we're going to see from Haji Berry. Is he going to try and, chase one down over the top of our defense and get on the end of it that way? Is he going to, again, have it sent into his feet and try and beat you by pushing it past you and getting it on the other side? That will depend, or that will determine how we need to, act in any given situation. I think that I really, really value Connor Antley's anticipation as a defender. I think that he's a very good one-on-one defender, but also one of his strengths is if there is a pass coming into a player, he's very good at reading that pass and stepping in between the player and intercepting the pass on its own, or putting pressure on the player's back so that they don't have the time to get the touch that they need, such that they can, let's say, lay it off or push it past Connor Antley and get it on the other side. All of those options. I think that Connor Antley will be probably utilized on the back line, and I think that he will be important for that anticipation, for one thing. I think that Robert Castellanos might or might not get the start. It will definitely, it was definitely important for him to get the 24 minutes that he got in this game, because that will give him a bit more of a grounding than just, playing and training. And hopefully that means that he'll be ready to deal with this. Now, who plays in the center? If I had to guess, that would probably be Robert Castellanos, provided he gets the start. But we do have to, think about, again, whether or not he needs to drop deeper to compensate for Haji Berry. I think that Haji Berry also does like to make runs starting kind of in the mold of Jake LaCava in this past game against Louisville City, where he has a lot of space to build up and get that speed that, he's definitely capable of. So it might be the case that players like Aaron Guillen and Connor Antley as the two fullbacks are marking him. And I like that, frankly. I think that Connor Antley has the ability. I think that Aaron Guillen also has the ability. He might not be quite as fast. I think that he definitely has good speed, such that, if it's not like they're sprinting half of the field, from the halfway line into our box, let's say, then he would probably lose that race. But if it's close enough that he can, mark his man and he just has to catch up a little bit, I think that will also greatly impact our chances of successfully defending against him. So it's going to be a big test, of course, one way or another. We do know that. And I would like to personally, just from what I can guess and what I can gauge off of Haji Berry's play, I would like to see Connor Antley and Aaron Guillen mostly, stacked up against him and see how that plays out. Again, hopefully their individual abilities will be good enough. I think that Jordan Scarlett and Robert Castellanos, they obviously are very good players and they would be able to do certain things. I just am not sure as well if they match up with Haji Berry in this game. So, we'll see how it plays out. Hell, there could be injuries between now and then. Obviously, cross our fingers that no one is injured. But, these are all things to take into consideration as we go into this game against Colorado Springs.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a very fun game. Honestly, I don't think there's a better matchup that we could have asked for to look to bounce back from a rough loss like this. Yeah, because Colorado is obviously such a good team. But again, they're going through that kind of rough skid right now, not really knowing what's going on with their back line. So I think this could be a chance to really give us that confidence booster again and kind of get back into a good run of form and maybe start a new unbeaten streak like we had going here. Yeah, I mean, the altitude, I think, might be able to play a factor here against us. Obviously a team that plays at sea level over here in St. Pete. So maybe we can expect a little more squad rotation, maybe some earlier subs than normal from Neil Collins' part. Just because
avoid the huffing and puffing.
Exactly, yeah. Just because we'll be playing at that 6,000 feet altitude over there in Colorado. So again, it'll be a good game, and I think we'll just have to deal with, like you said, the Haji Berry speed and dribbling ability, the ability to see the field and find space. You touched on exactly what I was thinking was, as much as, Connor Antley made this really silly mistake in this past game, I think we're gonna have to slot him right back into the 11, and I think he'll be the best matchup back there for Haji Berry's quickness and IQ and ability to see that that space open up. I think Connor Antley knows how to deal with that and how to close that space. And again, like I said earlier, Castellanos moved really well for his size, but I think just naturally, Connor Antley is going to be the better option for this type of game. With that being said, though, I think this could be a high-scoring game. Score predictions-wise, I'm not sure I'm bold enough to get with a really high-scoring prediction just because that never seems to work out. But I think we can win this kind of matchup as our defense just kind of seems to be better than some of the back lines they've been playing against in past games. And looking at the highlights against El Paso this weekend, most of their quick goals early on in the game were really just boneheaded errors from El Paso's back line. Yeah, again,
Let's try to avoid that this upcoming week.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, really, really silly mistakes, and people say you learn from your mistakes. Well, I think we can learn from El Paso's mistakes this weekend. We can learn from others' mistakes here and tighten up our back line to make sure we don't cave to that kind of high press that Colorado Springs is able to play so well. So with that being said, James, I think we can hop into our predictions here, and I'll give my prediction first here, if that's okay with you, because I think we might have similar predictions. So I want to get mine out there before you do, so you can't say I copied you.
All right, you go first.
There we go. I'm taking a 2-1 win for the Rowdies. I feel like that's a pretty safe guess because I think there'll be a pretty hefty amount of goals. I don't want to over guess how many goals there's going to be, but obviously Colorado Springs is a very offensively talented team. And I think that we are just as able to match up offensively. And with that back line that they're struggling to kind of like find themselves right now, I think we can capitalize pretty well. And I just hope we come out and kind of try and impose our game. And again, don't try and sit back too much, kind of absorb the pressure, despite, the challenges of playing such a quick team like Colorado Springs. And I think the one thing I'm most worried about is kind of Neil Collins being a little too careful with the quick play of Colorado Springs and maybe keeping the back line and the midfielders dropped back a little bit more and deeper than they usually would be to in case Colorado Springs has a quick counterattack opportunity. Yeah, so I'm going to take a 2-1 win, and I think we can impose our game on Colorado Springs better than we were able to against Louisville, despite the issues and any issues that might arise with the altitude. Obviously, we're such a deep team that I don't think that'll be a problem because we can rotate so easily. But like I said, I think we can just expect Neil Collins to make a couple earlier subs than he would normally make, rather than in the 75th minute, maybe in the 60th minute or something like that. So looking forward to this game. And again, I think we can pull out a 2-1 win.
Well, I would certainly like us to get a win. I'm not sure that I feel quite as confident. I think that with us not doing so well this past week against Louisville City, it's not going to affect our confidence necessarily. I just think that it will be a difficult proposition to go and do 2 away games and, try and get a result here. So I'm not necessarily going to go for a win, but I will not have us losing this game. I'm going to say that this probably does kind of turn out a little bit high scoring, and this turns into a 2-2 draw is my prediction for this upcoming game. I think that if we can cover Haji Berry the way that we need to, again, hopefully I would like to see Connor Antley and Aaron Gein as the 2 fullbacks. Then that would be good. But, I still think that possibly he might be able to sneak one past us, or even if we are, so focused on Haji Berry, somebody else does as well. It's not impossible, certainly. So that game is at 9. If you would like to tune in, please do so. It is obviously on ESPN Plus. And I would suggest everybody watch it. Unfortunately, I will not be able to do so because of that Indian wedding that I was talking about earlier. So, everybody, like I said, if you can, do tune in and support the boys, whether they are home or away. We got to do that. So now let us move away into our final segment, Extra Time, Carlos. We got some stuff to talk about here. We got what is this headline here? Double trouble. This twins off the bubble. What idiot wrote that? It certainly couldn't have been me who did that. But Ian Antley is signed to a deal through the rest of the season. He adds further depth at the back, and I think that that's going to be very handy for us going forward, Carlos. So how do you feel about this signing, which was delivered so well in terms of its headline?
Yeah, first of all, I want to say I had nothing to do with that headline. I want to disassociate myself from that as much as possible. Um, yeah, but apart from that, I mean, yeah, it's a great signing, whatever. Ian Antley, like that headline is just kind of not this headline, but the storyline of having a twin brother on the team is always, I don't want to say always because it doesn't really happen, but it is very cool. Just storyline wise. But apart from that, like I mentioned it in, the episode following the Loudon game. In Ian's short time on the field, he did impress me. He played very well. His aggression on the field and intensity were the things that stood out to me. Um, Obviously, great further depth at the back. You know, we don't want any injuries, but should anything arise, he seems like somebody that could slot in pretty well. Given the fact that he's been around the team for a little while, and given the fact that his twin brother has been on the team for what, second season now. So he's been around the team for a little while, and will definitely be a helpful piece of depth um, for our squad. Um, I don't think personally, I don't see him getting a ton of playing time the rest of the season, especially with Castellanos back. But again, like I said, maybe a tough stretch of games comes up, and he gets some off the bench minutes, or obviously again hoping there's no injuries. But like I said, if there are, he seems like a great piece to be able to slot in there as needed.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm pretty sure the way to look at this. But I am excited one way or another. Another thing to be excited about, and really there shouldn't be too much surprise here, but Neil Collins was named Coach of the Month for the USL Championship for the month of July. A deserved award. Congratulations to Neil Collins. Won every game through that month. I mean, what more can you say? that's as deserving as you can get, in my opinion.
Exactly. Yeah, I got nothing else to add there. I mean, how are you not going to win Coach of the Month after winning literally every game you could win?
Yeah.
And impressive manners too. I mean, like we had some lower table matchups, but we also had some impressive wins in that stretch. So well deserved, and here's to many more in the rest of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the next thing that we have here is checking in with our loanees. Carlos, can you tell us how they are doing over on the teams that they are at?
Yeah, so Raiko Rosarena, as we mentioned before, is out on loan for playing at Ford Madison, quickly becoming a fan favorite over there in Madison, Wisconsin.
I
If you
am
go,
shocked that Raiko Rosarena is becoming another fan favorite.
yeah, yeah. I mean, as you can imagine, I mean, great personality, but obviously even better goalkeeper. He really is fostering that talent that he's shown sparks of over here for the Rowdies. Looking to be much more consistent than he was over here, and he's proving to do so. Yeah, if you go to their fan circles or discussion on Twitter and whatever, I mean, you'll see a lot of people talking very positively about this signing. People looking to keep him in Forward Madison. I'm not sure if I'm comfortable with that. Definitely looking to bring him back next season. And on the other side of things, Timmy Mel still out on loan to Chattanooga Red Wolves. Again, he's also having a great season on that back line. He's kind of been one of their stars on the back line in past games for a team that hasn't conceded a ton and who's really finding strength in this more consistent back line in League One. The reason I noted this down in particular for this extra time segment is that they actually played each other this past weekend, Raiko Rosarena and Timmy Mel, for their teams respectively. They played to a 1-1 draw, with Forward Madison pulling off the really late equalizer, I believe in like the 95th or 96th minute of stoppage time. So yeah, both teams walked away. Probably a little upset to not get all 3 points, but obviously Forward Madison coming off a little happier with that late draw. But I mean, more importantly for us here at the Rowdies, is that Raiko Rosarena and Timmy Mel both had another fantastic game, another great showing. Obviously, both on the defensive side of things. So 1 goal allowed is not bad at all.
Yeah, no, it is good for both of them to see, and I think that will obviously help our team in the future one way or another. So that will do it for everything related to games. But we do have one more thing that we need to cover about the USL Championship overall. Was there, Carlos, any update on the Orange County situation, which we discussed last week? I believe that we have some news there.
Yeah, so actually literally later on that night, after we recorded the podcast, James, the Galaxy
Of course, it
posted
went that way.
yeah, literally an hour later. I'm not even joking. When we finished recording, LA Galaxy put out a statement saying that they are not interested in uh, being the sole tenants of I always forget the name of the stadium. It's like Champion Stadium, I believe is the name of the OCSC stadium out there. They're not interested in being the sole tenants, but by the looks of it, they are still interested in playing there. Definitely being another one of the tenants. Um, OCSC fans definitely kind of hesitant to let that happen. Either way, they were present at their city council meeting last week, despite the issue of the stadium being taken off the agenda. OCSC fans showed up in great number, and they were there to express their public sentiment, which was really cool to see. Seeing all that color in the city council chamber was very cool. Really cool to see all those people out there, all the fans of the team express their opinions and their thoughts and their love for the club. I think it's very noble of them and honestly a really, really cool thing to see on a 4 p.m. on a workday. So congratulations to them for showing up and making time for that. Kudos to them and kudos to all the work that OCSC is doing to kind of help organize that and rally their fans. Yeah, apart from that, no other updates on that front. Looks like they're just kind of at that stalemate. I think they're looking to discuss and officially put the issue of the stadium back on the agenda for the next hearing, which I'm forgetting when that's going to be. I think like a couple weeks. So something to keep an eye on. Yeah, I don't think LA Galaxy has that much support after all the backlash they've gotten. So personally, I'm thinking it's going to be unlikely that they end up there just because there's not really any support for them there. Not that there would be anywhere else because it's a LA Galaxy 2 team and there's not a lot of people that go to those games, James. But yeah, that's all on that front. And it's just something to keep an eye on with regards to this USL MLS dynamic and how that's going to play out over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if LA Galaxy just underestimated the backlash that they might receive. It was obviously the whole of the USL Championship fan base, not just Orange County, that was like, what are you guys doing? Why are you trying to do this?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
this is your 2 team. Go elsewhere. Go away.
Yeah.
Nobody shows up except the kids' parents, for God's sake. I mean, like, leave it be and let this team, which has been around for years, like, this is, I believe they are older than this current iteration of the USL Championship and played previously as the SoCal Blues. Like, stop it. They have worked for years to build up this fan base. They have worked for years to build up their youth apparatus. They've worked for years to build the relationships they have, like a partnership with Rangers Football Club in Glasgow, Scotland, my family's team. There's a lot of stuff to consider with this, and I just don't understand MLS like trying to bulldoze their way through USL Championship clubs. I mean, it ticks me off because I was talking about this with a friend earlier, but MLS Next Pro is it's the MLS reserve league effectively, but it is third division and it is considered professional. All but one team in this league are reserve teams to the MLS clubs that play. So there is one independent team. It's Rochester. They're formerly the Rochester Rhinos. They were taken over by a new family, as well as Jamie Vardy, a current professional soccer player in England. In all honesty, this is, personal and speculation. And I don't know if there's, we'll have to get the RBLR legal team to review what I'm saying. But, I think that they effectively were swindled into joining MLS Next Pro because their fan base, what do they have to show up for? They're playing against effectively like 15 to 18-year-olds or guys who are just out of college. And I'm not trying to disrespect any of those guys. They're obviously going to be much better players than I ever was or anything like that. But they are not like good opponents for professional soccer players. That's what I'm trying to get at here. Yeah. And they deserve to have the platform to grow into their own good professional soccer players. But at the moment, it's like if the Tampa Bay Rowdies were playing Atlanta United every single week, that would suck. So I don't know why Rochester did it, but regardless, they are in that league. And MLS is definitely trying to envelop a lot more, independent clubs into their division. Nashville has put their reserve team in Huntsville, Alabama. Why? Because USL was looking at putting a team in Huntsville, Alabama. Supposedly, MLS Next Pro is trying to get DC United into Baltimore, and that is a team that USL has looked at. MLS Next Pro is trying to absorb Jacksonville Armada. All fans of the Rowdies should be familiar with Jacksonville Armada, and they're kind of waiting out, looking for a league to join. So the MLS USL war is on, and I don't get why they're trying to do it this way, other than like if they do really want to be the only thing that exists, and eventually the Rowdies are playing in MLS Next Pro or something. I would not be happy with that, but I don't understand what their future goals are based on this behavior, other than possibly that. So it really got me animated, and I am not a fan of what MLS is doing here. I think that they have some good things going for them, but it is not what they do with fans.
Sure. Yeah, no, and I was going to mention that about Jacksonville News, especially. It looks to be something that's in the works, because their executives were out at the MLS All-Star game, um, per a reporter whose name I'm forgetting, from Orlando. But yeah, I mean, it's super frustrating, especially the Jacksonville stuff, because those games against Jacksonville back when we were in the NASL were really fun, and honestly, Jacksonville brought a really great fan base down to Al Lang when they were playing us. It was a really great environment, and we took a lot of people up there when we would go play in Jacksonville. It was my first away game. It was really fun. I have very vivid memories of that game and that stadium, and how great the Jacksonville fans were, and how loud their supporters group was. They really did have something special going, and it sucks to see what MLS Next Pro is trying to make them into, which is a independent team that plays against B teams, and that's just lame. I mean, it's not fun. It's not a good time. I was actually, I happened to run into one of the Rowdies executives in the front office the other day, and I was chatting with him about, like what games are like the hardest to sell tickets for. Like, last weekend at this time, when I chatted with him the weekend before, we were playing against Atlanta United 2. And I was like, yeah, I mean, this game's like got to be the hardest to sell tickets for, right? And I'm like, how do you advertise a game against a B team? And he's like, well, what we really just got to do is kind of lean into the experience, kind of sell the experience of Al Lang, sell the experience of the fans, the atmosphere, and whatnot. I mean, you don't even really try to focus on the opponent because it's a B team. I mean, essentially, that's what Rochester is doing. That's what Jacksonville is going to have to do if they go that direction. Just advertise the fact that this is kind of fun to go to, but don't really mention the teams you're playing against, because, like I said, they're literally reserve teams. They're literally B teams, and it's just not great matchups to play against. So, James, it sucks, and I hope Jacksonville goes, with us and ends up in the USL, because it's such a great matchup.
Yeah.
But we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I feel the same way. And I mean, if we can somehow get in touch with, I don't know, the Jacksonville fan base, the Jacksonville executives via this podcast, I don't know if they listen, hopefully, but what I would say to them is, imagine that your team is in MLS Next Pro, and in MLS Next Pro, their away games are always Orlando City B, Atlanta United 2, Charlotte FC 2, and all this stuff. I mean, your away games are part of being a fan. If that's what you're dealing with, that's crap, man. That's crap.
Yeah, definitely frustrating and whatnot. So again, it really sucks to see like these, soccer wars playing out. It's kind of stupid. And honestly, MLS, if that's their goal, is to be the only like MLS entity, it's not gonna really work, because USL is so established now at this point. It just doesn't seem like something that could happen. But with that being said, James, I think we can wrap up this episode. Um, you know, I think this was a much better episode than our Rowdies performance this past weekend. So I had a great time discussing it, not as great a time watching that past game. So here's to a better game next weekend against Colorado Springs, James.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's end on that high note. And we will say now, thank you, listeners, for tuning in. As always, we appreciate that. Please, if you have tuned in, made it this far, follow our RBLR Sports on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at RBLR Sports. You can also reach us on Twitter if you'd like. I am at RBLR James K. You can use the hashtag AskRBLR to get questions to us, or you could reach out to Carlos as well. Carlos, where are you on Twitter?
Yeah, come drop a follow at CarlosTPA10 on Twitter. Always tweeting about the Rowdies, always tweeting about all types of soccer. Yesterday I was tweeting about UFC for a little bit after the Rowdies game, because I don't know if anybody listening watches UFC, but Marlon Chito Vera is an Ecuadorian fighter who's really making a name for himself and kind of putting our country on his back in that sport. So really fun to see that happen for me personally. And I'm always tweeting about random sports like that. So come over, drop a follow, and I guess get exposed to a new sport too, in UFC.
There you go. There you go. So, yeah, follow me on Twitter, follow Carlos on Twitter. And like I said, use that hashtag AskRBLR so that you can get any questions you have to us. We love going through those, of course. And finally, please like and subscribe to our podcast. We are on Spotify, the iHeartRadio app. We are on Apple and Google Podcasts. We are on YouTube and all other major podcast platforms. There are all the ways that you can get at us. And for this week, for a better Saturday weekend and with a little meowdy here, I'm going to say, come on, you Rowdies.
Thank you for tuning into this presentation by RBLR Sports. On your way out of the stadium, please remember to like and subscribe.